Miss Martin Muses. Welcome to Miss Martin Muses, where we muse upon what makes me laugh, makes me cry, makes me happy, makes me sad, or just really ticks me off. Well, today we're talking about something that makes me happy and ticks me off a little bit because of the necessity for this topic to which I am bringing your attention today. That is J.R.R. Tolkien. Is J.R.R. Tolkien really that great a writer? Did he deserve the accolade author of the century? Happily, I don't have to prove this to you all because someone far more qualified than I has tackled this subject. None other than Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey, who wrote the work J.R.R. Tolkien, Author of the Century in the year 2000. This is going to be one of those videos where I'm going to be throwing out some notes that I have from this work and leaving them as food for thought. This is not going to be in any way a replacement for reading this work yourself. I'm pulling these particular quotes today from the foreword. Those authors of the 20th century who have spoken most powerfully to and for their contemporaries have for some reason found it necessary to use the metaphoric mode of fantasy to write about worlds and creatures which we know do not exist. He's speaking in answer to those that want to criticize Tolkien as just a fantasy author. He's pointing out almost all of the great authors were using fantasy and science fiction as well. Spoken most powerfully to and for their contemporaries. May I add, for us today. Fantasy sometimes gets a bad rap as being escapism. Shippey points out that these fantastic works are not escapism, rather. So many of these writers are combat veterans, present at, or at least deeply involved in the most traumatically significant events of the century. They had to find some way of communicating and commenting on them. What they experienced was horror beyond imagining. It makes perfect sense that they needed to use this metaphoric fantasy to explain the unexplainable, to cope with the uncopable, to heal from the unhealable, and as he says, communicate and comment. Connected to this, he gives what I call a money quote about Tolkien. Shippey says, Tolkien did not invent heroic fantasy, but he showed what could be done with it. He established a genre whose durability we cannot estimate. Some of the more snobby in the world who didn't like the idea of Tolkien being the author of the century, and perhaps even those who, in my humble opinion, maybe do not fairly criticize Tolkien, complain that just because something is popular doesn't necessarily mean it is great. Shippey concedes, but makes this point. Popularity does not guarantee literary quality, as everybody knows, but it never comes about for no reason. He goes on to use Charles Dickens as an example. In the 19th century, Charles Dickens was the popular writer of the era. People would wait for the next installment of one of his stories the same way people would line up and wait at midnight to get the next Harry Potter book. Now, of course, it's completely acknowledged that Charles Dickens is one of the great English language authors and that his stories are masterpieces to be studied and learned in school and at the university level. Shippey also throws out this idea, which I just loved so much, because those that might be sticking their nose up in the air, yes, I'm calling them snobs. People have to be educated out of a taste for Tolkien rather than into it. Isn't that food for thought? Tolkien naturally attracts people. It takes an actual effort to resist that. Shippey then gives a reason for perhaps why this is so. Why people stick their nose up at this fantasy writer. Quote, Tolkien not only poses questions about evil, he also provides answers and solutions. One of the things which has made him unpopular with the professionally gloomy or fashionably nihilist. I'm just going to let that one just sit right there. Then Shippey tells a story. Very few of Tolkien's critics have been prepared to put their dislike into an organized shape that can be debated. One of the most vehement indeed confessed to me in private, in the lift taking us out of the BBC house after a radio debate, that he had never actually read The Lord of the Rings, which he had just been attacking. Shippey's not the only one who has run across this situation. I have never once debated or discussed with somebody who really is a critic of Tolkien who has actually read the works. And you can find out within a few minutes whether they have actually read them. I'm sure someone is out there. Let me know. Help me out in the comments. And the final quote that I wanted to bring to your attention: the repeatedly expressed dislike of an influential and easily identifiable section of the literary world is part of the phenomenon. Very probably, the reasons for the dislike has a good deal to do with the reasons for the success. Tolkien has successfully challenged the very authority of the literati, and this is never forgiven. I'm going to add my own quote to this. People are willing to forgive you for being wrong, but they will never forgive you for being right. The works of Tolkien, particularly The Lord of the Rings, from the time of its publishing to this day, is by most numbers in the top 5 of the best-selling works of all time. As Shippey says, this kind of thing does not happen for no reason. I hope I've just whetted your appetite to read more of Tom Shippey's work, especially Author of the Century. As I said in the introduction, he says it far better than I. But how about you all? Let me know in the chat what I got right. Let me know what I got wrong or what I may have left out. Have a great day, everyone. Have a great day. And be certain to read the works of Tom Shippey.